Hi, I'm Otis Fulton. This is my wife, Katrina VanHuss. We're the co-authors of Social Fundraising, Mining the New Peer-to-Peer Landscape. And we're going to talk about how this all gets started. So, Katrina, why would someone want to use a social fundraising platform anyway?
There's a river that runs through society, and the river is the way people behave. And social fundraising, in my opinion, takes greatest advantage of the way people behave to raise money.
To raise money.
Yeah.
And as we say, social fundraising is bigger than you think.
It's bigger than you think. So social fundraising probably has been going on since since we lived together in small groups. And social fundraising, you could call it anything from what we do now, which is we ask our peer networks for money, to, as I think we say in the book, collecting money to bury someone who just died, like you would do in a small group. That's all kind of the same thing, or sharing food that we've gathered. These impulses to collaborate were built a long time before anybody called it social fundraising or peer-to-peer fundraising.
Yeah, for decades we've had events.
Yep.
And that's formed social fundraising. We called it peer-to-peer fundraising. It was based on the event.
Yep. And it's kind of funny when, you look for analogies before we started calling things events and peer-to-peer fundraising or social fundraising. The analogies were things like churches, where a group of volunteers, in some churches called elders or deacons, would coordinate the activities of other volunteers into fundraising and community action. So it's really the same thing. We just are quantifying it pretty much purely on revenue right now, but the behaviors are the same.
Yeah, and when the pandemic hit, we saw that our clients that had already had in place kind of a robust virtual community did much better than those who had to start from ground zero.
Absolutely. And actually, in my mind, and this is one of the few ways in which the pandemic was a blessing, because it underscored that, and it underscored when organizationally they didn't really understand community at all or understand its power, and that had been driving their success. So this was a real wake-up call, and really in an instant, black swan moment sort of thing, changed everything.
Yeah, and the hybrid event was born, wasn't it?
Yes, the hybrid event was born, and I think one day soon it will go the way of cell phone, meaning it'll just be an event, because of course you would communicate with people in a virtual fashion. It'd be crazy not to.
Yeah, and that virtual event then has led us into really what social fundraising is going to become in the future.
Absolutely. As we tease apart the way people behave and the way they have behaved in peer-to-peer fundraising and now social fundraising, and before all that, in groups and tribes and churches and states and villages, as we move forward into a new way to communicate with each other, the way we communicate is really the same. It's just the tools that we use.
Right.
And the way we do social fundraising is really the same. It's just the tools that we use are very different and create a different environment, which you have taught me over the years that the environment is way more important than what's encoded. So what does that mean?
Well, it's really the channel that you're talking about changing. Mm-hmm. It's really not the behaviors. Mm-hmm. Okay, what was your question?
What do you think that moving this activity online, where there's no longer face-to-face except the way that we're doing it here, what do you think that means to the behaviors that we are going to see?
Well, I think the behaviors are going to be the same.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't matter much what channel that you use, but in general the behaviors are the same. People respond to other people that are like them. Mm-hmm. They want to be in groups of people that are like them, that validate them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the online is very similar to the face-to-face peer-to-peer fundraising in terms of people's motivation.
Right. They want to be seen. They want to be recognized. They want to be part of the community.
Right.
They want to be in control. All those things matter.
All those things. We talk about why the way you walk matters.
Yes.
And explain what that means.
So I'll give it to you in layperson terminology, and then Otis can maybe explain the psychology behind it. The way we walk matters because the design of our events, the way we constructed the interface with the participant or the constituent, the way we measured the performance of the staff person, the sometimes even the brand and individual touch points and the language that we use in those touch points, like emails, the website, that really matters. Like you are constructing the situation or the laboratory in which you're going to run the, I don't want to call them rats, but you know what I'm saying. Like you're going to run them through the maze and see how they behave, and your design is the maze, and the way that they behave is the outcome of what you designed. And so one of the things that we know is really important, for example, to get really granular and tactical, the words that we use. So Otis, if, for example, I say, come help us support our mission, what does that do to you if you're a constituent?
Well, it means I have to do something for you. I'm not trying to do something for myself. And what we know is that people want to do something that meets their values, that meets their goals.
Right.
So help me really isn't the way to approach that language.
Instead, it is, I know that you are a caring person, let us help you achieve your goals. Is
Right.
that more
Right.
favorable?
Exactly. You know, it's all about, you know, what the reward of philanthropy is for people. It makes them feel good about having some kind of a change in the world. So, you know, this partnering language really doesn't fit that kind of a scenario.
Yeah. You know, the other way that your event or your property design really matters, and I'm going to use an example, and like many of you will hate me from now on because I use this example, and I'm so sorry. Said it before, I think the 5K is the spawn of Satan in terms of philanthropy, because what we're doing is we've designed a maze, so to speak, a laboratory environment in which constituents are confused. Like there are, there are two ways to have a relationship with somebody or an entity, and those two things are a social or a market relationship. So real quick, explain those.
Well, people who are in a social relationship with your organization or with other people, you know, they're doing it because they feel like it's the right thing to do. It's something that they're intrinsically motivated, as psychologists would say.
Yep.
Whereas people who are in market relationships are doing it in order to get something. There's some kind of a transaction that's being had.
And how well do those two kinds of relationships work together? Can they coexist?
No, they don't coexist well. In fact, what happens is the market relationships crowd out the social relationships. And so that's when you offer something to people who are in a social relationship, they flip over to a market relationship, and that's not where you want your supporters to be.
So back to the spawn of Satan example, which is the 5K. So what we've done is we've invited people in. We've said, hey, it's going to cost you this much to do this thing. And that is what? A
market relationship.
Market relationship. And yet we want them to behave as if we're in what?
A social relationship.
Very good. And so it's confusing to them, like not on the outside of their brain, like they're not conscious of it, but unconsciously it's confusing. Yes?
It is. And, you know, we say that there's a reason why walks have been so pervasive over the last 30 years. You know, we talk in our book, people can walk for free, and that's good. Explain why it's good that people can do it for free.
Because it's not confusing. There is no reason I would be there except that I want to support the mission. I'm not there because I want the entertainment. It's not that I want even probably the T-shirt, because really, do we want T-shirts? Not really. It's that I can only be there because of the mission.
Right.
There's no other reason.
Right. You know, we talk about social fundraising being the front door for organizations. Talk about how social fundraising feeds other revenue streams in an organization.
The typical nonprofit has multiple revenue channels. You've got your major gifts, middle giving, you know, direct response. You've got online fundraising, all sorts of things. And what we find is that when we look at the constituent list of organizations that have been heavily funded by peer-to-peer fundraising or social fundraising, that's where they come from. Social fundraising is connected to the rest of fundraising, clearly by the humans. What has been the story in the past is that social fundraising acquired donors are not sticky, that they don't stay. But when you actually evaluate the data, you find a lot of them are there. They either stick or they come in another channel, but they got their initial exposure through the peer-to-peer or social fundraising property. Many of them will become fundraisers or team members, and then they gradually come on board. So it is a very important acquisition device. In fact, I would argue that in performance metrics, we really don't serve ourselves and our organizations very well when we make revenue the only performance metric. In my mind, there should be a few. There should be revenue, sure. There should be volunteer acquisition, yes. There should be donor acquisition, yes. Those things are so much more important in the long run than purely the money now. And we've not talked about them or made them part of a staff person's performance metrics ever. So it's, you know, when you look at a list, like you could go buy a direct response list and you could spend a lot of money to get qualified names, very expensive. You don't know if they have an affinity. You hope that their attributes say that they do. But with a peer-to-peer generated list of donors, here's what you know. Somebody went to them with a 100% credible message of this organization and mission is important to me. And then they got on the list. Somebody said, will you give me money to support this mission? That's how they got on the list. That person who asked them, they wouldn't have asked if they thought they were dead broke and they couldn't donate. Yeah, because that would be embarrassing. So they're qualified for wealth. They're qualified for interest. You wouldn't ever ask someone to donate to a mission that they were averse to. So they're a highly qualified list, and yet we prefer to go spend $6 a name to get.
So your fundraiser is qualifying every
Yes.
lead for you.
Every lead your fundraiser
you're
is
saying.
qualifying.
Yeah, and you know, to prove your other point, you know, where do most major donors come from? They come from folks who have been small dollar donors.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
So, you know, we talk about social fundraising being engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Sure. Well, I'll use a story. I was trying to help a local politician many years ago get elected. And I called their office and I said, hey, what can I do? And the only answer they could give me was write a check. That was it. At that point in their campaign, they weren't looking for volunteers to knock on doors. Write a check was the answer.
And how did that make you feel?
Angry. Little pissy. Yeah. It was not a good answer. And often that's our answer to our fundraisers, to the people who really care about our mission. Like, you know, can they go do cancer research? No. Can they, do surgery to help a patient? No. You know, what can they do? And our answer has been write a check. And that doesn't feel great. That's not great in terms of making me feel empowered. It's not great in terms of making me feel connected. And certainly not in making me feel recognized, because we don't really do a good job even for recognizing for donations. So, you know, when the answer is, hey, you can come on this day and help us do this thing, or even better, would you be in charge of this? Yeah, that's powerful. That makes me feel great.
Yeah, I think it's the connectedness aspect that, you know, people really crave.
Yeah.
And we really underestimate that.
Yep.
In terms of, you know, why that attracts people to nonprofit work.
Yep. You know, I know we're going to hit it in another, I know we're going to hit it in another chapter, but it might be nice for you to go through the trifecta just super quick here. And we'll do it.
Trifecta. Yeah, positive psychologists have looked at people who are satisfied with various aspects of their lives. And they find that over and over, people report three things. They have a sense of autonomy. They have a sense of competence, which means they're doing something they feel is important and they get a chance to do it well. And the third is relatedness. They feel connected to something bigger than themselves, the organization, the group, the mission, the movement, whatever it might be.
Yep. So Otis and I play games. So when somebody says they quit something, a job, an organization, a sports team, whatever it is, he and I look for the reason, and those reasons always are one of those three things. You know, my boss micromanaged me. What is that?
That's autonomy.
That's autonomy. I felt alone at work.
Connectedness, relatedness.
Nobody sees how hard I work.
That's competence.
You know, it's always one of those answers, like I'm such a contributor, but they don't see me. They don't appreciate me. I'm not connected. I'm being told what to do. That's the answer. I usually win the game, just saying.
Those three things work in marriage too. So let's get a little bit into the economics of it. We talk about how social fundraising is part of a balanced revenue portfolio. Let's talk about why that's the case.
Sure. So we're all seeking sustainable revenue, and one of the wonderful things about social fundraising is, barring world pandemics, the investment, you can pretty much predict what you're going to get out the other end, by measuring the investment and measuring the maturity of the event. You have a good idea of what's going to happen next year, and that's really fantastic. The other thing that's fantastic about that is that it's unrestricted revenue, which is often hard to get, particularly in the world of donor advised funds and things. So you've got unrestricted and highly predictable revenue that is hard in other revenue channels to achieve.
Right.
Maybe direct response, that might be the best analogy there.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and yet we know that organizations are set up to structure in silos.
Yes.
Major gifts.
Yes.
Legacy gifts.
Yes.
Peer-to-peer.
Yes. And the interesting thing about that, I know why they do it, right? The tools are a little different. The data is segregated often. The people have a little bit different skill sets. But the downside of us doing that is that the constituent suffers. That's the person, we don't raise as much money, and that's bad, but the constituent actually suffers. The more engagement they have, the happier they are, the healthier they are. Is that right, Mr. PhD?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we know that we are doing a disservice to our constituents when we silo. The reason we do it, performance metrics, tools, habits, all of that, but it's really detrimental.
Yeah, when we write about siloing stops lead flow.
Yes.
So
yes.
we talk that's what's bad for the constituents. What's the downside for the organization?
Right. If I'm afraid that my highest fundraising team captain is going to go become the gala chair, that's going to stop me. I don't really want to make that introduction, even if they ask for it. I got a job to worry about. I got a mortgage. I got all those things. And my performance the year after is going to look different. I cannot tell you how many times over 33 years I've heard the battle between marketing and the social fundraising department, or major gifts and social fundraising, that they don't want to share data because nobody wants their relationship messed with. And so what they're really concerned about is their relationship with the constituent instead of the constituent's satisfaction and meeting their own life goals.
And what that does is that prevents the organization from looking at the donor or the supporter as having lifetime value, right?
Yes. We measure lifetime value sort of after the fact, when somebody's shows up with this big donation, we're like, oh my God, and they've given this much over this many years. But we don't use lifetime value as the driver of our behaviors,
right,
in relation to the constituent.
Right.
Yep.
Well, we finished this section of the book talking about performance metrics beyond revenue. Mm-hmm. So you've touched on them a little bit here, but can you?
Sure. So performance metrics beyond revenue, in the old days, we would do what we called a soft credit, but that typically happened within a silo often too. So performance metrics in my best world beyond revenue would be, how many leads did I put into the system? How many constituents did I bring on board to the organization and the mission at large? Nobody gets credit for that, right? It just doesn't happen. What you get credit for is revenue. Leadership volunteers. If we really did, if we even collected the data, which we don't, about leadership volunteers the way we do about donations, then we would quickly establish a financial model that said leadership volunteers is the money. That is where the money is. We know this anecdotally. Few people have studied it deeply, but that is, in my mind, the biggest thing I would go for.
Right.
How many people did you put in positions to make meaningful decisions, be recognized, and achieve competence?
Yeah, and again, siloing is the anathema of all those kinds of outcomes, right?
Yes, cuts it down at the knees. Right. Absolutely.
Well, that's how we start out the book. We will be back in the future with some other sections, so thank you for watching.